Hey guys, and welcome to the Fish Room. I'm Rachel O'Leary, and you may notice that things look a little bit different down here. And that's because in the past week, my husband has finished the construction of the new shipping station stand. So all the ones that used to be behind me are now gone. Now, last week I showed you how he chooses materials and makes the leveling feet. And this week, while I was in Aquashella meeting all of you, my husband took over the camera and my channel in order to show you how we make and then install the brand new shipping station rack, which consists of 21 new aquariums. So let's take a look at the process and hear more words of wisdom from my darling husband.
Now, since we've recently shown you how Chris actually physically constructs these stands, we've decided to not spend too much time on that. So you'll see here that he is doing a lot of squaring, a lot of measuring, a lot of tack welding, a lot of clamping, and really just making sure that everything is the absolute correct dimensions that we need for this project. It had a very specific space in the fish room that it needed to fit in for very specific aquariums. You see, this is going to be for all the aquariums that I utilize for my sale fish. So we needed it to fit, we needed it to look nice, and I wanted it to be right across from my shipping station. Chris spent quite a few days doing all of this prep work, tacking everything, prepping the surface, then welding it together in order to really make a solid unit. Now, as you can see, this is not exactly an easy job to do by oneself, so I helped as much as I could until it was time for me to leave for Aquashella. And at that point, Chris takes over the camera and explains to you guys the rest of the process.
At least put on a cute hat.
Yes. So one of the things that comes up when we're planning these stands is the reality of me being me and always wanting to upgrade. And right now I have a bunch of 10-gallon tanks, which is what's going to be going on this rack, but we built it so that 15s will fit as well. But what we didn't really think about is how, if I change from 10s to 15s or 15s to 10s, whichever way I go, the tanks need to be supported. So they're different sizes.
So 10 gallon, 15 gallon, that would be a lot of material.
And the reality is because these aquariums aren't very large and this is so stable, what we're going to do instead is put a support crosspiece and then just use plywood on top of it, because then I can put any size aquarium that will fit and it'll have full support around the entire trim without Chris having to waste his time and material doing doubled up cross braces everywhere. It's gonna weld up all those corners, take a look at if it still has any flex or not, and if it does, put in some sort of support gussets in the corners again. It sounds silly, but I'm not nearly as worried about 10-gallon tanks, in all honesty, as I was about my 150. That's one big aquarium. The likelihood of multiple 10 gallons failing on a rack like this is almost negligible to nil. So it's not...
I'm pretty sure you could support a 10-gallon tank on 4 nails and it'd be fine.
Yeah, so, you know, it's... But we still want it to look good, and we want it, you know, to set a good example and to do things properly. So stay tuned for the eventual product.
So once the actual construction was done, I drug it out onto the driveway and then just gave it a coat of Rust-Oleum flat black paint. This is what we've used on all my stands, and it's really easy to touch up. It's really easy to use, and it's relatively affordable. And I like how it sort of disappears into the background of the fish room. One great advantage to doing these steel stands is they really take up way less space than their wood counterparts, and I really like how that looks down in my fish room.
Good morning, everybody. Chris here. I am off frame for a good reason. And that is I don't like being on video, and I especially don't like the sound of my own voice. It feels very awkward to talk to myself in my shop. Normally when I'm doing that, it is laced with profanities, obscenities, and very poor singing. So, just get started here. This stand that we built together is about 60 inches tall, about 75 inches long, and about 28, 29 inches wide. In order to fit down our basement, we're going to have to cut it in half. before we built it, I knew that's what we were going to have to do. I figured it would be a lot easier to make 6 welds, welding the legs back together once it's in the basement, than it would be to make 3 welds per leg once it's down there. It'd be a lot easier to keep square and just put back together. Yeah, so I've pre-marked cut lines along the stand, and they don't really have to be perfect because the stand's only going to go back together one way. Even if I made the cuts totally crooked, as long as I brace it back up and square it up in the basement, I can weld it. So not really worried about precision here. Just going to get to hacking. From this point on, I am going to let Rachel do voiceover. So here we go. Here's what we're doing. Stands are coming in the sliding glass door. Gonna stand up, walk them through here without breaking all of Rachel's beautiful plants and terrariums. She's gonna kill me. Bring them in this way and then down the steps. All set up in the basement. Got the grinder, welder, gas bottle, and all my supplies. So what I did down here is level out that part of the stand this way and this way using the leveling feet. So that's all good and level all the way around. And this shelf and this shelf are leveled out as well. And what I'm gonna do is start in one corner and just work my way around welding each leg. There's 6 legs, so 1, 2, 3, and the same thing mirrored on the other side out of frame. To get the tubing square to each other, You can see I used 2 clamps. I'll walk over there in a second so it's not so shaky. But I basically clamped it to keep it as guides to keep it square. Here, take a look. Looks a little crazy, but by clamping this to this, and I used another scrap piece here and clamped it to the stand. And this is just a ground clamp for the welding machine. It's making sure that it fits flush this way and this way. And I'll just, since I clamped them both I clamped this piece with this clamp to the bottom of the stand, and I clamped this piece to the top of the stand. It can still move freely, so I can set my gap and get it nice and level before I start welding. So, little one-person trick, since I don't have my partner in crime, Rachel, to help me. So, this is the deal. It does seem crazy to cut a stand that was already made in half, but each time I weld one of these 1.5-inch tubes to another tube, 1.5 inch, 1.5 inch, 1.5 inch, 1.5 works out to be 6 inches. So by doing this, and this, I'm only doing 1, 2, 3 feet of welding down here, 3 linear feet. Whereas if I did it the way I did the last stand and make the tabletops and then weld all the legs on down in the basement, if I would have done that here, it would be 9 feet of welding. So works to my advantage doing it this way. Sorry for the bad videography. So another thing here I want to show you guys. Since they are clamped to separate surfaces, I'll say separate pieces of the stand, I'm able to, like I said, adjust my gap here to level it out. And what I just found, well, just fine, but the kerf of my cut is equal to just about the same width as a TIG rod. So to keep it where it was in the shop, oops, sorry, to keep it right back where it was in the shop, put a TIG rod in there as a spacer, and once I weld it in a couple spots, probably these 3 corners, I'll be able to take the TIG rod out and weld that gap up, and we'll be back in business. All right, all done. Weld, 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 and back there, a weld. That probably took, I don't know, 20 minutes. Much better way than how we did it the last time. Very good. Next thing I'm going to do is take this thing here. Some guys call it a flap wheel, flap disc, tiger paw. It's just a 60 grit sandpaper you put on your grinder, and I'm going to smooth all the welds out, and then we'll brush on some touch-up paint, and it'll be ready to go. I'll bring the plywood down, stick it back on top, so that when my mama Rachel gets home, we'll be ready to go to set her up. I also have to get rid of the old stand that her Hillstream was on, and this is a little embarrassing. This is one of the first things I made Rachel for her fish room. They were stands that I found at the scrapyard, and since they were all kind of uniform, I brought them home and then just welded some tubing as cross brace support. Horrible welds. I did first time MIG welding stainless with my 110 MIG welder. So I'm gonna cut this thing up and get it out of here. That way when she comes home, we're ready to rock and roll.